It's May 10th, 2023, and you know why you're here, so let's kick this off right and introduce the players. Hey, I'm Jarisar, a WoW esports aficionado.
Hey guys, I'm Big Moran. I'm a World PvP Padawan.
Hey guys, I'm Tresap Jake, and I'm a caster person.
A caster person?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm playing everything
Today we're joined by Gabe, who's he's got a lot going on. He's been in the WoW community for quite a while. But Gabe, why don't you give an introduction to yourself?
Hi all, I'm Gabriel. I have been playing WoW for too long of a time for my lifespan. I have been doing PvP competitively for quite a while, 10 years plus, and I've actually competed in AWC before. You can find me streaming on Twitch as well as my podcast at Pig and Whistle Tales.
Indeed. And I've listened to you a few times, well, more than a few times. I actually listen to you quite regularly, and I was like, took me forever to try to get a hold of you, but I'm excited to have you on, Gabe. I'm super excited to have you here. I know you are, I would say, you're about as passionate about PvP as anyone. And the fact that you do so much of what we do, which is content creation, talking about PvP, is actually tremendous, because I feel there should be more people out there doing stuff, not just streaming it, but actually like doing this podcasting, doing this, talking about it, and that. What made you decide to just make a podcast though?
Well, it was mainly due to a pandemic. I was obviously working, but furlough happens, and it's kind of one of them things that you just sort of do during furlough, I guess. Many times, like, you just don't know what to do. It gets to like the point of 2 weeks you haven't been to work, and then it's like, oh, okay, I may as well try this. And obviously, WoW is something that I have been playing practically all of my life since I can remember, to be honest. Which sounds quite sad, but it is what it is. But yeah, essentially that's kind of where I thought, oh, okay, I'll at least give it a go, and it just sort of grew there. I sort of really enjoyed just doing the episodes like weekly, and then it sort of, yeah, my love for it grew, and I thought I could at least have an impact on some sort of WoW, and PvP is the biggest one that I do, or sort of the biggest thing that I do in WoW. So I thought I may as well try and, have some sort of impact there, I guess.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's. I think I did exactly the same thing, which is I got furloughed during the pandemic, and I was like, oh well, I play a lot of WoW. Maybe I can do something. And then I started making videos, and then one thing leads to another, and then you suddenly sort of just trying to do content creation. It just kind of, I think that period of where you're stuck inside, unable to do anything, sort of just kind of bred that sort of thought and process, and made a lot of people realize, actually, this is really fun. Why haven't I done this sooner?
Yeah, I kind of felt the same. You're playing it anyway, so it's like, okay, I may as well do something out of it. Like, and if it is to have any sort of impact in PvP, which, I'm always down for PvP changes rather than Shadowlands having like one patch where there's like no changes at all. I'd much rather just have constant sort of changes in WoW, so that's kind of what I would like to have at least.
Yeah, and I think lending your voice to that discussion is such a big thing. I think that's why I try and be as vocal as I can on like stuff like Twitter, and I have done as much as I can with my own YouTube videos. Like, you've just got to be able to get it out there. It's not just Venruki that has the ear of Blizzard. I'd hope some of us maybe get a little bit of influence. I mean, I guess they're lurking around Twitter. They're probably seeing all these retweets from technically_PvP. Which is a great account, by the way. If you haven't started following that, you should definitely, definitely follow it.
But I have to admit, that account has kind of fallen behind because I've been busy as F working. So yeah.
I think it's because you retweet that Tresap J guy way too much. I think everyone's like, whoa, we've had enough of his opinions.
Funny enough, I've been losing followers for some reason. I wonder why.
There we go.
All right. Well, instead of just talking about making content, let's actually make something. And I know, well, it's your Big. Are you ready? You got the knee grade pass. You made it, right?
I do, yes. I have two of them. I have one normal one and then one on reserve.
Okay.
So I guess I'll just get it started.
Well,
This is
how about if I do the bumper
yeah.
first?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
This likely won't be a clean fight, so keep your distance, eh?
All right, there we go. Need green and fast. Let's do this.
So there was some controversy recently on Twitter regarding, well, I guess in the community, not just on Twitter, regarding the distribution of a specific mount from PvE. So there is a mount that was originally scheduled to only drop, well, a mount appearance that was meant to drop only from the mythic difficulty of a raid. That was changed, I believe, yesterday to now have a guaranteed drop rate from mythic and then a much lower drop rate from normal and heroic, I believe. So this got a lot of people talking about prestige-based awards. So I think right now there's kind of a split in the community. There's sort of the collecting side of the game and the competitive side of the game. And more so than ever, I believe those two sides of the game are clashing, with the competitive side saying that we need maybe more prestige-based awards, and the casual collecting side maybe saying there's too many prestige-based awards. Why are things gated? Why are things gate kept behind skill level or whatever it is? Why these metrics matter. So my question, my need read pass, is what we should do about this dilemma. So we have three options. We could say maybe there are too many prestige-based cosmetics. Maybe things should be more accessible. So that's one option. So make things kind of accessible to everyone. On the other side, there are people who say that there's too few prestige-based awards, that maybe there should be more achievements, cosmetics, mounts from hitting certain ratings or hitting certain benchmarks in PvE. Or the third option is that maybe we're just kind of in the right place right now where there's kind of a good balance of both. So we should just keep things as they are. So we kind of have a Goldilocks problem. Are there too many prestige-based awards, too few prestige-based awards, or is everything just right? So I guess I'll let Jake take a stab at this first.
Oh, so you throw me into the hot seat. Yes, this is a quite the difficult one to decide on, and I can see what you're saying about whether or not this might be a one-sided. We were talking just before the podcast went live about Negri Pass, and there is a possibility that all of us choose the exact same answer depending on entirely on where we align. So this is going to be really difficult. I think my personal opinion is that I agree that the prestige makes them more valuable. And I've seen a lot of chat on Twitter where people are going, I think Super Tease is also a big proponent of this. I've seen him a lot more talk about it. How, yeah, that's why you look at store mounts, they're there for like 1 or 2 days, but no one goes back and really use them because actually there is no prestige that you bought it, everyone's got it. So like, what's the point? It's sort of like why Spectral Tiger is such a big thing. Why probably people would go for Spectral Tiger because it is so rare, and rarity obviously gives you some sort of prestige. Everyone's like, whoa, that's a really cool mount. So with Blizzard kind of opening up a lot more of these rare amounts, especially through Twitch drops, there are a lot of people that have paid a lot of money for something that is, well, originally was quite rare, and that everyone is now getting. So is everyone going to start using it again? Is that going to still have that? I mean, is that a good thing? I don't know. And I guess this is what we've got to decide. And I've kind of gone on a rant on that one, but I think my answer is I think I'm going to need I think I'm going to need just right. And the reason why I'm going to need just right is I think we've got a good healthy balance at the minute of a lot of mounts for collectors, because there are a lot of collectors out there, and then also the good amount of stuff for a good amount of stuff for for the people who want prestige. Like it's still hard to get Gladiator to a certain degree. It's still hard to get those specific titles. A specific, like doing Mythic is difficult. So the specific ahead of the curve stuff. I feel like that is still relatively difficult, and those are at a decent level for people to get. So I'm gonna need just right. I'm going to greed too few because I would much rather have some prestige to mounts, because that's the whole point of doing it. I mean, if everyone could get anything, I mean, people are probably not going to bother too much. Like, it's probably one of the reasons why gladiator pushes are so so enjoyed, and why people do so many of them. And I'm going to pass on too many. And I'm only saying that because I feel like people would get bored of a game where you can literally get everything all at once. I mean, that's shown on so many different games. Like, for example, San Andreas is totally ruined as soon as you get the cheat codes. Like, I got bored of that instantly. and that's my answer, I guess. Long and convoluted, but we got there.
All right. I want to
Nice.
hear what Gabriel's thoughts are. I feel like he has some thoughts on this.
I wish I went first. Because before the show, I think I think you said it right. It's going to be very tight, and it might be the same sort of answer. So I'll try and switch it up. Let's see. I think you're very correct in terms of, like, it's quite annoying that stuff is gatekept, but at the same time, if there's too few of these gatekept like mounts, they're not as prestigious. Too many would obviously dilute how like good they are, how good it makes you feel to actually mount up and use these, because there's so many mounts in the game. There's actually, Christ, how many mounts is there? There's 500, 600, who knows at this point. Some of them are obvious.
900 or something. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
actually more like 900. Yeah. Some of them are a lot more prestigious. The ones that I sort of always go to are the Glad mounts from every season, from TBC all the way through to Dragonflight. So I was going to go with just right, but I'll switch out for the purposes of this. I'll try and argue too few of them. No, I'm not too convinced about my answer here. I would have liked to have gone just right, but I'll go with too few purely on the basis.
You can do whatever you want. You don't have to change it up.
No, I'm gonna try and argue this point. I'm gonna try it.
Okay.
I think obviously you have the Mythic Plus stuff, or no, not Mythic Plus, Mythic like raid stuff with the one that was just released in Aberrus. And you are correct. Yeah, they just recently gave it a low chance to drop on normal and heroic, which is quite funny actually. I do want to quickly say there was people assumed that it would drop from these normal and heroic modes. It was never actually like in the journal on the PTR that it would drop from these. So that's kind of where people have got the misconception of, oh, it's gonna like drop from these difficulties. So when it was just mythic, everyone started to have a little bit of a riot and a breakdown, which is quite funny to say the least. But I mean, yeah, Blizzard were always going to put it in normal and heroic. That's what they did with the previous one, wasn't it? The Razageth one.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure. So for too few amounts, I would definitely say that you could add stuff that's more not connected to PvP and Mythic. You could look at something that's really super out there for, I don't know how they would do it, but battle pets or anything like that, like a collector's edition one. Like you collect, there's a add-on called All the Things. If you collect a certain amount of that, like in the game, like 20,000 items, you get a mount for that, something that's more prestigious. So you could have it like for any sort of part of the game. I don't know how they would do it, because some of these would be obviously a little bit more accessible, but it would still make them somewhat prestigious. Maybe if you complete all of the sets in like old tier sets or something like that, who knows? I would have to. I'll go with. I'll need too few then. I would say greed just right, because I do feel as if it is a perfect balance, because you have the gladiator one for PvP for those who are PvPers, and obviously the mythic stuff like Razageth, and the latest one, I completely don't know the name of it. I've completely forgotten, but it's a really cool purple looking dragon. I do have to say it does look cool. So I'd have to say greed just right, and definitely past too many. I don't think there is enough. Almost, I'd say that there's more of a want for them rather than a, oh, this is getting way too out of hand kind of thing.
Interesting. I actually find that if you actually look at all the cosmetics, all the transmog, you look at all your different sets and the various recolors, not just mounts, but all of that, there's a lot of stuff out there to collect. Like, it's it's actually kind of crazy if you think about all the stuff that they have in game for people to collect. And
Yeah.
and honestly, like some of it is it, there's like the difference between one and the other is if like something's a little tattered or that one has gold, gold inlay and this one has red inlay somewhere, or that kind of stuff. So on it, honestly, I think there's they, and I guess this is like that's just general cosmetics. When you're talking just about the prestige stuff, the stuff that you get for getting Gladiator, the elite sets you get in PvP, the mythic raid gear and the colorization and the effects that come with that, then definitely that gets much more reduced. And I think maybe that's where people get a little lost, is there's the people that want those things but either don't have the time put in to get to them or the ability, because a lot of this stuff is all playing with friends and all that. So if you don't have people to play with to get to that level, or you can't consistently play with to get to that level to earn those things, then it definitely then it becomes a question of, did you have the skill and you just couldn't put in the time to get there and build the social network in order to get there, or is it that you just don't have the skill? And I find that there's a little bit of where people then go on to try to use this prestigious reward, this prestigious look, the title, the whatever, to say that they're good at something and somebody else is bad, which is, I think, the unfortunate side, because then it becomes very emotional, right? So now for my answer, after I just did a rant like Jake.
Of course, needs to be done.
I think I'd say I think it's almost like there's, for the prestigious stuff, there's too few. I feel like it'd be better if there was some scaling there, at least on reward. You get XYZ when you get to, I don't know, let's say 1600. You get XYZ when you get to 2K or 1800 2K, and then obviously 2400 is your glad mount, and then beyond that you're looking at getting your rank 1 titles and that. At least that's for PvP, and also conversely, I mean, that's just arena. We've often said how RBGs really doesn't have anything beyond your vicious mount and a hero title. What else do you, I guess, elite set? What else do you get out of that, right? I'd love to see something more out of that. Solo Shuffle just got the pennant for legendary, which is nice. Maybe a bit more there. So I think those kind of things, those little carrots to push people to get to, to play more consistently and to get to the, try to push harder into those other things would be nice. But on that, I think, so needing too few would also mean that I think they need to reduce all the other clutter, because there's just too much other crap out there. And then, I'll have to, I guess on that way, then I have to greed on just keep it, just right, keep things the way they are, and I'm going to pass on too many. I don't think there's enough of the prestigious stuff or things that have prestige to them, and there's just too much. You can just run around and grind something until you get everything you want. So.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is I hard agree with adding like prestige, like more prestige stuff. RBG, I think, this is my opinion, and this is a bit rogue, but I think you should have a flying amount only for Gladiator, and that legend, legend RBGs and what was the other one? No, legend and RBGs should be a ground mount, and that cool. You get flying mount for Gladiator in 3s, and then for legend and hero, or legend and whatever RBG bracket version of legend and Gladiator, you get a ground mount, and at least then, like, you can kind of, there's a bit of a sort of, I don't know, like a crossover in that regard. I think that'd be really cool, and I think they should do it for Mythic Plus as well. Like you should have like these extra bits and pieces for doing well. I know that does technically already exist. But,
this is a PvP podcast. We're not going to talk about PvE here.
Sorry. Sorry. I apologize, guys. I'll take this one. I'll hold my hands up. I apologize for talking about PvE. I will remember this next time you go on about M+. Revenge will be mine.
Strange
feel like-
enough, I'm the one that owns the mute button. So,
Oh no. Okay, I apologize, Great Overlord Garrison. But I think we
Uh,
need to hear from Big now.
we do.
I'm interested in Big's answer.
So I like Garrisar's answer the best. I generally think there's just too much stuff in WoW these days, and it feels weird saying that. But like sometimes like the new transmogs they release, like some of the new cosmetics, to me sometimes it doesn't look like World of Warcraft. It looks like, I don't know, a different MMO at times. And I think like the whole WoW aesthetic has been a bit watered down because there is no consistent aesthetic, I think, anymore, because you have crazy looking gear sets, crazy looking mounts. And I think there's maybe just too many things, but at the same time, I think there should be more prestigious based cosmetics, mounts, tabards, whatever it is. Because I do agree that I think having those carrots for people to chase is really important. And obviously, gear upgrades is not the correct carrot. I don't think people want that as their carrot.
No.
So I think having some form of cosmetic is really important, as long as it kind of is consistent with the aesthetic of World of Warcraft. So I'm gonna need on too few. I'm gonna greed on just right. And I'm gonna pass on too many because I don't think that everything should be accessible to everyone at all times. I think it's important to have desires in MMOs, and I think it's important and honest to have desires that you recognize that you maybe can't achieve, and that's fine, or maybe you don't have the ability to achieve those things. I think being willing to admit that is a good thing. I'll never be bothered by the fact that I will never have mythic gear like from mythic raids, but I respect people who invest a lot of time in that. It doesn't bother me that I don't have those items, but I can certainly appreciate when other people do. So I think we all pretty much had the same answer, which is what I was kind of concerned about, but whatever.
That's because we're all very sensible and
Yeah.
clearly, yeah, we're just all sensible people.
Mhm.
Yeah. I will agree though. I feel that having player power tied behind prestige is not good.
Yeah.
That has never felt good.
Shadowlands was the example there, wasn't it? Because that was in PvP. It felt awful to like PvP gear, great,
Mhm.
but locking it behind rating and or that sort of thing, it just felt so stodgy and just felt so awful and gave birth to some really bad habits and certain things that have just kind of blown up really since then. So I
Yeah.
think yeah, more prestige for mounts is it would be
Okay.
anything cosmetically, I guess, is great.
I do have one spin-off question for y'all on this though. Is
Ready?
how do you feel about the explosive use of botting in PvP so that people can achieve the rating to get these prestigious items?
I mean, it's cheating, isn't it? At the end of the day,
Yeah.
like it's plain
Yeah.
and simple. It's just cheating.
It's crazy because these days it's harder to tell who's cheating, which I think is a huge problem because this is a whole nother conversation. I made a tweet the other day about weak auras, that the monkey
Yeah.
meme where, like, they see the stimulus, the brain lights up. I think a lot of the way people bot these days is kind of like weak auras on steroids. They see the healing stream, the bot kills the healing tide totem instantly. That's something that players are already kind of programmed to do with weak auras, and the bot just does it automatically. And it's not like, in the past when we thought of botting, it was usually like interrupting or maybe damage rotation. Now it's all this other stuff. But it's kind of hard to tell maybe who's botting sometimes because because of weak auras is playing kind of in the same way, you know? So I think it's a massive problem. But it for sure though, it's really toxic. Like, because it's just, yeah, it's so pervasive. I didn't realize how pervasive it was until I started kind of really paying attention. And then I was like, wow, wait, there's a lot of people cheating this expansion.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
it's
kinda just
easy to.
Yeah, it just ruins the game for others as well. Because the way that I've been able to see, like, obviously people cheating is mainly through like kick bots or something. Like, you start casting instantly, it's like a kick. It doesn't even need to be. It's like ridiculously inhuman reaction, but like you said, it's very tough to tell because we've all been programmed now to kill the healing stream totem, kill the healing tide, kill the totems. Do everything that you would have done, but like it's just amplified by weak auras. It's like, oh, I've got like death mark on me. My hunter will just instantly mending bandage me or something. But botting is just it's not fun for anyone. I don't get how it can be fun for them because it's like, sure, you're winning, but that's you're just sitting back and doing nothing. How is that? You don't feel that sense of achievement, I guess, if you get your certain rating, but it's always like, oh, look at me, I made glad this season. And it's like no one knows that you've actually cheated or whatnot. So I don't know. It's just, from my point of view, a bit disgusting that people even do it in the first place, but it just
Yeah.
takes the fun out of the game.
I don't disagree. I just kind of curious what you guys' thoughts were. I just want to point out everybody who's listening right now, either live or at home, don't forget to head on over to our Discord once this gets published tomorrow, and you can play along with Need Greeted Pass and tell us what your choices are from Big's selection. In the meantime, let's get into the upcoming WoW PvP events.
Get in there and fight! Stop hiding!
Indeed. So I'm not sure if you guys saw a big tweet. I know Sarth TV, he is really doing this, but the hardcore dungeon speed runs are coming to an end with the World Tour Grand Finale coming on the 13th of June. That should be a pretty awesome time. Yeah, this is dungeon running at hardcore. Like, so how fast can you do it without dying? And if you die it, delete the character. That's a little harsh, but it's been it's been pretty fun so far watching, I guess. Right now it just ended. I'm gonna scratch that one. The DXB Wrath of the Lich King Arena Tournament is coming up just this weekend, starting on the 12th actually of May with in the EU. So good luck to those folks there. And I didn't update this. Shoot. The AWC Season 2 did get announced along with the Great Push. So just as Adrian had talked about, they were just finalizing some details. It just got pushed out just recently. And so signups actually have just started. I believe Cup 1 for the AWC is the middle of June. And yeah, if you go to the World of Warcraft news, I'm sure you'll see it there along with the at WoW esports. And that's really about it for events that I'm aware of. Unless if anybody can remember anything else that is missed, please don't hesitate to let us know, and we'll happily mention them.
I have one thing. I have one thing
No?
to add actually
Oh.
for the AWC Season 2. I don't know if you
Yes.
saw that rule where teams can now have one player from a different region. So
Yes.
I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know how practical that's going to be with latency, but I think I think for sure some teams are going to do that.
Oh yeah.
I didn't even know that you couldn't do that. I always thought it was sort of like you could have someone from another region. It's obviously just a bit of a disadvantage because of latency. I didn't know that they specifically only just allowed that.
There's been like unique cases where people have been like in a different country for an extended period of time and were able to play in that region. Like Rind, is from Brazil, but he played on a European team at BlizzCon, and that's because I believe he was like studying at a university in EU at the time.
Mhm.
And Chanimal, I think, is currently living in France or something. I
Yeah.
don't know why. So he was able to. I think if as long as you have residency in the country, it's you're allowed to play. But now they're just like opening the floodgates for cross-region play, which, from my understanding, it's the first time they've done that.
Do you think that's going to be a positive change, Big? Do you think that's going to be something that's gonna be really great for our, I guess, more and more insular community, especially in the AWC.
I'm way too maybe like the nationalist is coming out of it. Like the
Oh,
patriotism is like being unleashed, but I think it's like kind of cool when the regions are kind of separate because I mean we haven't had a BlizzCon for 4 years now, which is crazy to think about. Um, and I think the nice thing about BlizzCon is that it did feel like it felt like you were backing your country at least from my perspective. Like I always wanted NA to win. Um, which they didn't do for many years in a row, which is kind of upsetting. But uh, I I think now that feeling is. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be kind of because you can only have one member from the opposite region. I guess the teams are still technically gonna be NA versus EU teams, but you know. I don't know. I think it's a bit goofy, but I like it. But at the same time, I think it removes that sort of regional, uh, like beef,
rivalry.
I
Yeah.
guess, rivalry. Yeah,
Yeah.
Waters it down a little bit.
Can
but
it
not
truly
completely.
be EU versus NA if there's like an NA or a EU player or on the other side too? Like, can
Yeah,
it really?
yeah, of course it can, because what happens is that NA person that goes to EU, or that EU person that goes to NA, has sworn allegiance to the opposite region, and that's just that they're fighting for they're a mercenary at that point. So, but you know what I'm hyped for? I'm hyped for the Korean players, the secret WoW Korean players that can finally come over and actually play for an EU or NA team, probably an NA team. And I think that's going to be interesting. If that happens, if we get that, I think that would be an absolutely amazing thing to happen to WoW esports. And the reason why I think that is because if you think about League of Legends, the first world championship, right? That was Fnatic that won. It was basically only EU and NA. And then they started getting it bigger. Now the whole world is involved with the world championships. Obviously, there's specific regions that are really, really good, aka Korea. But people can start moving between NA and EU teams and going to Korea and all that. And that's kind of what happens with football as well, right? Like football is that way, and kind of major sports. And I think that's amazing for WoW esports to not just be bound by the sort of borders of the region, but being able to take even just one from another region. Doesn't have to be NA or EU, but can be anywhere else, and that actually potentially gives some options to other players and getting that sort of talent into the bigger regions, which is obviously EU and NA. And I think it can only be a positive thing. I think yeah, I'm really excited about it, and I really hope actually something happens from it. But I'll be sad if
So
it doesn't.
unfortunately, the only regions in the rules are NA and EU.
Yeah, that's fine. They just Koreans just go to EU and NA.
Yeah, true.
They just that's what they do. It's like, oh, I am here in America from the VPN. That's currently updated on that. But yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
Okay, I think that'd be pretty cool. I'm excited for it. I think it's gonna bring in some new teams. It's gonna add probably some new spice to the flavor of everything. But yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. I do hear the whole thing though, like the latency. I guess arguably, the amount of NA teams that have played with people from New Zealand and Australia, where the latency has been just horrendous. Having an EU player, especially if they're Western Europe, playing as a North American team, that I'm sure that's fine.
And honestly, the latency is not that bad. Like, because I'm West Coast, North America and US, and when I play on EU, I think I have like 150 latency. I mean, it's noticeable, but it's not like unplayable. Like, you just have to. It feels like you're playing an older expansion where things were kind of a bit laggy, anyways. And I'm kind of, I'm maybe a bit used to that, but yeah, it's not that bad.
It's like batching basically comes back.
Basically,
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
All right. Well, either way, I think it'll be interesting. We'll have more news. I'll remember to update the show notes for the next time. But why don't we get into the subject analysis? Let's get into the real reason why we were here. we'll start talking with Gabriel about well, just generally PvP and making content.
I'm gonna light you up, sweet cheeks.
Indeed.
Well, PvP wise, obviously, I've not. Season 2 just started. It was yesterday for NA. Us plebs in EU got it today, sadly. I've not played much, but it's actually, from what I've seen, enjoyable. All right, that's because there's no rep paladins, and that's my personal peeve. But essentially, from what I've seen, it is going to be a very lock-dominated meta. Warlock, Destro lock is just disgusting right now. From what I've seen, anyway. Sadly, I have to put Moonkin in there as well. Although I do love my Moonkin, and I don't want him to get nerfed at all. It does do a lot of damage, but Lock, I would say, is the far superior. It's tough to know where the meta will go, I would say. But I very much think it will be a caster meta more than anything that we had at the end of Season 1. I don't see Paladins getting a look in. Probably Monks might not get much look in. Stuff like that. Rogues, I think, are... Well, they're rogues. They'll always find a way to get in there in some sort of comp, but I think you're looking at more of a caster-dominated meta. I'm not sure what you guys on NA have actually found it, essentially yet. Have you guys managed to pick up anything in terms of that, or?
I definitely think Destro Warlock and Boomkin are certainly on people's radars. Specifically Destro Warlock. I mean, for sure, making precog almost baseline for every caster is a huge buff to casters in general. I would not be surprised if they nerf precog at some point during this season because, think about it, they nerfed the duration of interrupts too. So think of this from a shaman perspective. You miss your I think Windshear is now a 2-second lockout. You miss your 2-second lockout versus a Destro Warlock, you just give them Bloodlust and CC immunity for 4 seconds. I mean, that doesn't seem like a very fair trade. So
I'm okay with
I
it.
think, yeah, sure.
Yeah, same.
But I mean, I think for certain, I mean, definitely they needed to do something to make playing a caster more enjoyable because being a caster in Shadowlands and at least season 1 of Dragonflight was noticeably a bit more oppressive than being a melee, I think, at least for the average player, especially with something like an arcane mage. Mage had almost no representation just because it was one of the casters that actually needed to cast a lot. It was kind of squishy and just got bullied. So I think, yeah, if this is the season of the casters, I mean, I don't mind because I think they need their turn.
I welcome it. Yeah, I'm
I'm
honestly
so down.
Rep Warrior is just wait, hold on. Actually, just a quick question for Gabriel. Do you play Boomkin?
Yes, I do.
Ah,
I have a couple of them max level.
I'm
Yeah,
just
I'm
just
very
asking
much-
for reasons. Anyway, moving swiftly on, past my personal question. I think I welcome the new era of caster overlord. As a elemental shaman main, I think it will. It's about time. It's about time. And I would also say that Ellie is up there as super broken in terms of being just really, really strong. And I think if you're out there and you're listening to this podcast and you play Elemental Shaman, I think personally it's a good shout at the minute, aside from obviously being, because first of all, you are a nice little counter to Warlocks in general, casters in general. And also, they never nerf Ellie. Okay, that spec is untouched always from the beginning of an expansion to the end. So if you're looking for a ranged caster to pick up, and something that doesn't change, Ellie is your best bet. So
don't get
flies on the
how.
radar.
I don't get how that's not nerfed. I was playing a game during the off season. I got hit for a 200k elemental blast, and then it overloaded and hit me for another 120k 0.4 seconds later. And I don't know how that class is untouched, to be honest. It got buffs to its damage because it was the crit nerfs came through, and obviously Shaman is a lot of crit, but I think that's all it got, buffs. Pretty sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's. I think that the reason why is because Blizzard forgets that that elemental shamans exist, and basically, you'll never see an Ellie shaman on there on Twitter or other places like that complaining about anything other than melee or rough, and that's it. And then every now and then you'll get like a Tony meme that will be like lava, 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 shamans are crazy, and even that sort of propaganda campaign didn't actually even do anything because the lava, lava, lava didn't get nerfed that hard, so it's just kind
Yeah.
of the same. So yeah, but anyway, I digress. I feel like we should talk about content content creation.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry about
No,
that.
no, no. It's
We
fine.
go
It's
on a
fine.
tangent.
No, well, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about. Was this was going to be more of an open conversation, talk about PvP, how we feel about it so far in DF, and all that, and
Yeah.
as well as the creation of content around it. Um, I think that all of us is just all a great conversation. I wish I had been recording the conversation we were having before we actually started streaming because that was just a great little conversation. Should have just hit record and just off we went, but
Yeah.
so be it.
No intro, just
Yeah.
pure conversation.
Exactly. I guess but here's something I always struggle with is obviously I'm a dad. I work. I have very limited time to really play, and usually like when I do get on, but it's either do some WoW chores or do a few things and then back off to doing IRL stuff or making this podcast. So I'm just wondering, I think we all make content. But first to you, Gabriel, how do you balance that? How do you find the time to make the podcast, come with the idea, make it, edit it, and all that stuff, as well as find the time to play WoW?
A lot of the times it's just as I'm playing WoW, I'll be taking notes. So there's a lot of obviously stuff that can happen during PvP. You get angry messages from people who just are having a bad day. You get loads of like everything in between. I mean, a story that I'll probably use later on in mine or something is I literally joined a looking for group like party, and apparently I'm boosted, he says, and kicks me without even playing a game. And it's just like them sort of stories you'll note down, and you can use it obviously in a podcast later on. So while playing, I'm actually getting the ideas for podcasts like later on down the line. As for creating the actual podcast itself, I I'm very much nocturnal when it comes to my sleep schedule. So I have a lot of time during sort of the evening hours to play and get this content or the ideas for content, and then everything in between, like the night where everyone's asleep, I have nothing but time essentially to record it, edit it, post it, all that kind of things, as well as like the social media aspects and stuff like that. So I think that's not a bad way of doing it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not a bad way of doing it, and that's just how
No.
it sort of fell into sort of a rhythm. I just fell into the rhythm of it, and that's how
So,
I go about it.
so I've got a question then. Why a podcast in particular? Like, out of all of the things, like as your step into content creation for WoW, why a podcast? What kind of made you want to do that medium?
I've always been one for voicing my opinions, I'd say. Twitch is obviously like if you were to go down the streamer route, it would be sort of to even get started in that. It would probably be several hours a day, pretty much 7 days a week for quite a good amount of time. Podcasts you can sort of look at and do it whenever you've got a little bit of free time. You can edit a small bit, or you can get another idea for next week's episode or something like that. So it just seemed a bit more. It suited my sort of how I go about doing things, I guess,
Mhm.
over anything else like streaming or YouTube, that kind of thing.
And how often are you doing your podcast? Because
Uh,
unlike Gareth, I'm terrible. I actually haven't listened yet, but I will have to
it's
obviously
fine.
catch a podcast.
I started off doing once a week. Every Friday I started doing that, and it's you have the ideas where do I do an extra episode? Do I do two extra like small episodes? Do I do just move it onto a weekend? Would that be better for more people to listen to it and stuff like that. But I do one on Friday and a small one on Wednesday, and the Wednesday is kind of just a little bit extra, sort of a 10-15 minute on a different game or just a small subject in WoW, anything like that. So twice a week, to put it simply.
And actually, to be honest with you, the thing that impressed me the most, actually, we were talking about this before stream. As Gareth said, we should have started recording because we got into all the good stuff. But you do that alone. It's not like we have. So there's three of us, and the conversation flows, and we bounce off. Even when it's even when we don't have a guest and we're talking about subjects. I mean, I think there have multiple times where we've sort of been looking at the clock and gone, "Wow, okay, the time has literally escaped us. We've got about 10 minutes to do literally the rest of the podcast because we're still on Need Greed Pass." And so that in itself, yeah, it's funny because it's true. But that's the sort of thing that we have, and that's very easy. And that's, well, no, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's great to have that ability to bounce off of. What kind of keeps you going through? I don't know how long does your podcast go on for, but what kind of keeps you going through that when it's just you there?
I have so many thoughts about WoW in my head, and it's just sort of a nice way to express them. It sounds crazy. It sounds absolutely weird. But essentially, I'm just speaking what I think is like best for the game in terms of its health, its content patches, whatever it might be. But it's all these thoughts that I just have, and I think, okay, this could be a good idea. This, and then that leads into something else, and I kind of, as I'm speaking, like I'll present a point and then I'll try and argue that point and think, okay, maybe if I look at it from this sort of angle, it can be this, like it can be like different. It's very, I straight up don't know how to tell you how I do it. You got to be crazy essentially to do it solo, because it is like you are just having a conversation with yourself. But when I do the podcast like late at night, obviously there is only myself to have a conversation with. Everyone in the UK pretty much is asleep. You can't wake someone up and just be like, "Oh, I need your help recording something," or something like that. But yeah, essentially you got to be a little bit crazy, I would say.
A little bit crazy.
yeah,
just a
best
little.
advice.
Okay, so a little bit crazy. I'm fairly sure playing WoW kind of makes you a little bit crazy. So that's already one box ticked
100%.
off.
100%.
That's really interesting, because I think that's the thing. Like, I mean, I don't know if you would you say you kind of organize your podcast beforehand? You like really sit down and go, okay, this is what I want to talk about today, or is it kind of like a spur of the moment inspiration kind of comes up from the heavens? You're kind of like, oh, let's talk about this, and this leads on to that, and this leads on to that. Is that sort of what's the way that you kind of structure?
I'll obviously have the actual episode laid out in terms of what it is. So take PvP, for example, and then I'll have small notes. It'll be current meta. It'll be what's good, what's bad, what needs nerfing, what needs buffing, that kind of thing. And I leave it quite open-ended. So I have like the initial start of it, but I'll be able to go into many different aspects of it. So it's more, okay, Destro Warlocks are obviously like crazy right now, so they could be like in need
Crazy
of a nerf.
awesome.
And yeah, no, I'm not thinking that.
Crazy fun.
No,
Yeah?
I'd say
Oh,
crazy
okay.
oppressive kind of thing. Yeah. Anything that isn't a boomy needs to be nerfed is
What?
what I'll go with.
Yeah, the classic. Yeah.
I like big bolts, and I cannot lie.
Wait, aren't
That's
you an
what-
affliction warlock though, Gareth? I don't know what you're talking about.
I've dabbled in the destruction every once in a while.
I see.
That's why my
So-
ult is a Destro Warlock, but I'm not going to say about that. I'd still want it to be nerfed.
I think Gareth was just admitted to being a bottom roller.
No, I'm always going to be a boomy at heart. I'm never changing that. Such
That's
a
good.
fun class.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd leave it very much open-ended, and I kind of just take it from there, really. Very much open-ended questions that I give myself, and yeah, I spend, like you said, with the need, greed, and pass, you can just sort of run out of time and be like, oh god, I've got 10 minutes left. If I get hung up on one sort of subsection of that, it's almost like, oh god, okay, I've got, not a lot of time left kind of thing.
I think the neat thing about the way you do your podcast though is that yeah, if you run out of time, or it depends on how you're doing it, you can just end it. Like it's not like you have a set format where you have to hit certain things. It's very open ended, so you can just start and end, and that's it. And there's just a bunch of conversation in between of you saying your thoughts on something, and that's fine. I mean, like you're there's obviously there's when you're talking about classes, there's the times when you look at different hot fixes or the expansion notes. There's your dungeon run conversations and stuff like that. Like it all just has your thoughts. So it's not like you have a fixed, you have to hit certain points before you end the podcast hour, right?
Yeah, I'll always try and aim for a certain time, but it's always very much I I'm very much to the point with something. So if
Mhm.
something needs to be nerfed or something like that, I will always express it like, okay, this needs to be nerfed. This needs to maybe this is what needs to be nerfed. Maybe like they're healing their damage or whatever. So it's very much to the point, and there is no obviously like you said, there's nothing to really bounce off of apart
Mhm.
from the voices from my monitor. Like it's yeah, it's really weird to just sit here, talk to a monitor for however long, and then sort of end it. But that's kind of why it has to be so uh what's the
Uh,
word? Abrupt, I guess, or
yeah,
straight
I
to the
don't know.
point.
I think as PvPers we're kind of used to just talking to the void or talking to ourselves because it's like we're talking to the PvP devs. So
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I also think, you know what? Speaking of actual PvP, think about when you're doing arena, right? And you're sort of chatting to your teammates. You're basically talking to yourself because when you're doing arena, no one's actually really listening to what you're saying. They're kind of you kind of going like, okay, yeah, I'm in CC, I'm in CC. You're just like describing everything you're doing. Oh, I'm cloned, I'm cloned. I've got this, I've got this. No one ever
Mhm.
goes, okay, that's really nice to hear that you've got this. What do you think about that? No one ever does that. You never have a conversation. You're just kind of speaking words at the monitor and hoping that other person kind of interprets that and can kind of you know do that. So I think actually that's probably good practice for speaking to yourself at a monitor.
Yeah, that is very true. I think I definitely think the people I play with don't listen to me, but I have to listen to them. We're in a we run a weird comp. We're very much a setup comp. It's just with a couple like mates essentially, and they've recently switched. So the person who is my healer now was my DPS partner, and the person who's healing is now my DPS partner. So that's why it's a weird comp. But I would definitely say that I'm not listened to because, like you said, it is just I'm CC'd. Like, can you do anything off? Anything like calling out for CC is the only thing that's listened to. I think it's more can you like trap off of my clone or can you trap off of my root beam, that kind of thing. I
Yeah,
think that's the only calls that actually
Mhm.
get listened to.
Well, there's,
exactly.
I think it's much more enjoyable to play like a setup heavy, control heavy comp because the communication I feel like matters a bit more. Um, I've always personally found myself a bit lost as a healer when I'm playing like a comp that is really passive. Like I main a Resto Druid, and I've always been really lost playing comps like LSD, for instance, because I'm not really sure what my role is outside of healing, which I know sounds ridiculous, but to me it's just like what do I need to be communicating? Like not nearly as much. And it's hard for me to like interpret the game state, but when you're playing like a setup based comp especially, you feel like the communication is like it's like a river, you're flowing in a direction and you're trying to like maneuver your way through the river like through with the communication, which is to me always been like really fun. Like I always play as much as people meme on it, I think people should like get the experience of playing like Rogue Mage or something like Rogue Mage, just so they can have that like feeling of coordination with their team that you
Mhm.
don't really get in every single comp. Like it's community like setting up a kill with CC on multiple players is a very difficult high level task and requires really precise coordination to do perfectly. So I always found that part of the game, communicating with your team, has always been like really fun for me. as from a healer point of view. And I think people should, open themselves up to that experience because it's really enjoyable.
Definitely agree. Definitely agree with that one because the setup based comps are the best. Like wholeheartedly, they are the most fun. You have the most fun playing those comps because there is such a clear win objective with them. I think that's where the term brain dead comes from because not for playing setup comps, but when you play anything like Ret Warrior or kind of double melee that just zugs a target, TSG being the classic, the kind of brain dead comment comes from that because you're just kind of just going forwards and there's no clarity on that. You're literally just kind of going. I mean, even LSD back in the day, where you're just dampening, it's sort of your role there is to just not and you're kind of like you're just so passive that it feels like you come out of a game. It's been 15 minutes, and you're sort of like, okay, back into the next 15-minute game. Whereas with setup comp, you can be done in 30 seconds, and you've totally outmaneuvered someone. Okay, yeah, you've got a sort of I could need this trinket, like or whatever, something interesting. Like there's so many individual plays in that which are so much more enjoyable than anything else. And it obviously doesn't have to be just rogue mage, but yeah, I totally agree. You should have everyone should play at least one setup comp, and don't think that you should play the classic RMP. Play something like Boomkin Frosty K, where you've got those 1 minute goes with Root Beam. They're really fun. That's really fun to play. I played loads of that in Shadowlands Season 2. And it was probably the most fun I'd had in that entire expansion. So I really advise trying like some wacky sort of setup comps that are actually really, really fun.
So here's an idea or a question. What because if this is going to be a caster heavy season, which looks like it's starting to be, what would be the caster setup comps that you would want to see in season 2?
Well,
go on, you.
No, I'll let Gabriel go first. You are the guest one.
I would say there's probably two that spring to mind. One involves a druid, the other involves a lock. I think lock is going to be a massive staple point in terms of a caster cleave at the moment. There's the classic, which is Shadow Play. Shadow Priest is actually looking very decent as well from the recent changes with the whole Void Torrent and your dots just tick for so much. I've seen Vampiric Touch hit me for 91k. Like, I don't know where that's coming from. But yeah, they seem very, very solid right now. So Shadow Play is probably very much on the cards. Ellie Boomy is a very good comp. If you're going for like an AoE rock kind of build. But I would say anything with a lock, probably not going to go wrong. Certainly at the moment. I would definitely say Shadow Play or even lock Ellie would probably be a very much just a stronger variation of Boomy Ellie.
Okay.
Well, the interesting thing, so we with Skill Cup, we make a video almost every expansion about how to like pick an alt, like what alt should you play. And in that video, we categorize each spec by kind of how it fits in with a specific archetype. So for melee, we have these are just random words I came up with, but you'll kind of get the point. For melee, we came up with brawlers and tacticians. Okay, a brawler would be something like a Fury Warrior. That's a quintessential brawler. It wants to be in your face, attacking, going crazy. Full speed ahead. A tactician would be something like a sub rogue or a Windwalker monk, who want to like kind of weave in and out of the fight. And there's obviously a middle ground, which would probably be something like a survival hunter, where it wants to do some weaving, it wants to stay in. Its role is a bit kind of torn between those two. So with casters, there's the same distinction. There's the wizards, true wizards, which is something like the frost mage, for instance, who just wants to stand there and cast. They don't really care about getting precise CC. They just want to pump damage. And the tactician equivalent of a caster would be a pace setter, is what we call it. And this would be something like a boomkin or a fire mage, where they are kind of more control oriented, especially fire mage, right? They wanted CC, well, at least in Shadowlands, they wanted to push in CC the healer. Boomkin, same thing. They're just like constantly peeling, constantly CCing. They're wanting to set the pace of the game. The thing is, there's not that many tacticians and there's not that many pace setters. The majority of the game is kind of designed around the brawler wizard archetype. You know, kind of classes or specs that want to only do like damage. And so it's kind of hard to have like true setup based comps because you really need like a boomkin, a sub rogue, fire mage, the hunter. You need like very specific classes to make that actually work. And sometimes they just like kind of don't mesh well together. Destro is kind of interesting because I think it is a wizard. You know, it has those elements of a true wizard where it just kind of wants to pump damage. But I think you can play a warlock, a Destro warlock, kind of like a pace setter almost. Like you could play rogue Destro and have actual, you know, setups. So it's just kind of interesting how I think the game is internally designed around just doing damage, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how the game seems to have progressed over the years, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm wondering then, like, would the quintessential setup comp be a caster and a melee then for that extra, that tactician or that setup person to really, is that the kind of comp we're probably going to be seeing?
The elephant in the room is that I mean, very few casters actually have a stun. You know, you need a reliable stun to be a setup comp, and I think only, I mean, Destro has kind of has a stun, but not really. Ellie kind of has a stun, but not really. Shadow Priest does, like, you know, Shadow Priest is why Shadow Priest can typically play with melee almost every expansion because they can do little mini setups with stun silence, right? So it's just kind of hard. Like, you know, people have been talking about giving Frost Mage's deep freeze back for ages, and honestly, I feel like that'd be nice, because it would kind of break. It would disrupt this kind of path in game design over the past few years where Frost Mages has become just like a pure wizard, and you know, I would want them to have a bit more flexibility to play with other melee because it seems like Frost Mages always just play with either an assassination rogue or just like cat wizards, you know. So I think yeah, just the fact that very few casters have stuns kind of limits the ability for them to play setup comps, you know, with anything other than a melee, really.
Yeah, I mean, my first sort of big, sort of higher end arena was playing Ellie Fire Mage in BFA at the end of BFA, and it was a setup comp based around combustion every minute, and it was really easy. You just kind of triple CC'd, so we'd get Poly on DPS or Poly on healer, Cyclone DPS, and then I would lasso kill target whilst the mage popped combustion and rinse them. Like that was your kind of win condition pretty much. You'd get the trinket the first time around, and then you'd win that way. And that was the only time in the last sort of, I guess, couple of expansions really since then that I can think of a big like caster comp that was a setup comp. I guess maybe God comp is another one. I know that a friend of mine played H Pala God comp in Shadowlands season 1 and 2. That worked out really well with the paladin providing the stuns on the kill target or stuns on the healer, and with the shadow priest providing the stuns. But again, that's shadow priest basically with the utility. But those are the only ones I could think of, and I will say point blank that was the most fun I had, even though BFA was really grim. But that comp in particular was so much fun to play, and you just knew what the condition was, the win condition every single time. It was very like self-explanatory and very much sort of like, this is what you do. And that felt really great.
You also have to take into the account the healers, because like you mentioned there with a H-Pal, you have Hodge, don't you, for the stun target. So a lot of casters can play with just a H-Paladin, or at the moment, like monks are very much in the meta, and they obviously have sweep. They have a lot of things to keep a target out of like line of sight with Ring of Peace and stuff. So it's the stun is obviously very impactful, but there's other utility that you can use to like utilize for a double caster, essentially.
True.
There definitely is, yeah. But by itself, like if you were to put the two of them together, you need something that pairs up. I mean, that's just the kind of that's the classic sort of that's where Rogue Mage came out of in TBC. It's sort of one has the stun, the other one has the big damage, and it all just worked together handsomely. And
Yeah.
that's sort of the way it is. And I think Shadow Priests are very lucky in the fact that they've always kind of had that impact with those abilities, but then also, sometimes their damage has been truly awful. So it's hard to really find them much use other than CC bots. But we'll see. I honestly think this is the season where we could find more enjoyable ranged setup comps. I think they're out there. They definitely are. I think we can find them.
Mhm.
So
Another thing, actually, just quickly wanted to mention. You think of like casters that obviously get no stuns, but Druid hasn't had a stun forever. You could obviously talent into it back in Shadowlands and before that with Bash, but you would lose out on other utilities such as I believe it was the Roar, which disorientated. But now Druids actually do have a Bash, so you can utilize that in a caster comp, which is a 4-second stun. I think it's still 4 seconds. I hope it is. God, I'm pretty sure it is.
I don't think it's changed. I don't think that's been changed at all. But
I don't
I
think it
suppose the
did.
problem there is that you've got to get into melee range.
I
do
find
that.
myself quite often like close enough to the target where you can just wild charge back and sort of because obviously root beam is not really on a GCD. So as you're like leaping back, you can root beam and then turn and bash, that kind of thing, the kill target and stuff. So I think there's, like you said, potential that something can occur in this season with a caster comp, but it's quite a niche thing where you have a
Interesting.
stun on a caster.
Yeah.
All right. Great conversation. I wonder. I'm really curious to see where season 2 goes. I'm curious though, and this inevitably happens. What do you do when the season goes long? When there's nothing really new to talk about? How do you deal with that, Gabriel?
This happened in Shadowlands, didn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, it was a really long season in Shadowlands, if I remember. Was it season 2? I'm leaning towards it was season 2. I can't quite
I can't remember if
put
it
my
was season
finger
2 or
on it.
season 3,
Yeah.
but I think it was season 2. Yeah.
Season 2 was when the cap was super high, like rank 1 cutoff was like 3.7.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I think that was the season. Um with not a lot of changes, the only thing that kind of Shadowlands had in terms of that being the latest that I remember a long season going was the Covenants. You could obviously switch it up quite often. I'm pretty sure they allowed you to switch it up and retain your renown or whatever during the
Yeah.
switch.
Yeah.
So it allowed a lot more potential to try stuff out. And I think a lot of the time that's where the talents will come into play in Dragonflight this season. If a season goes on for a while in Dragonflight, you can obviously find different like builds essentially to utilize. I think the biggest example was there was a couple for Boomy in season 1 where it was an AoE build and a sort of single target build. You can just play around with it. It's very tough when there's no actual changes though, where like there's no nerfs or buffs. It's very much just stale because it's always, I don't know, an RMP. I think it was mostly RMP throughout Shadowlands, from
Yeah.
what I recall.
Yeah.
It was always just every other game would be Rogue Mage Priest, and then it will be a melee cleave, and then Rogue Mage Priest again.
Yeah.
It does get stale, but you have to try and find a way to just play around it. I enjoy PvP as it is. It sounds sadistic, just running your head against Rogue Mage Priest and like loads of melee, but essentially I just enjoy it that much that it doesn't bother me, but it's very nice to have them changes and constantly switching up. I'd rather have the changes constantly flowing. I don't care what is meta as long as they're constantly changing it to like try and balance stuff. If Rogue Mage Priest is meta one season, fine. I'm okay with that. If next season it's double caster, yep, that's fine. It's a different meta. It really spices things up. Meta after that, it's melees. Sure, I'll figure out a way around it. It it's a lot more favorable to have these buffs and nerfs. But ultimately, I find a way to change my talents or change the build that I'm running to make it more enjoyable if there is a prolonged season, I would say.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of the more constant buffing and nerfing that we've had. My only thoughts on it is that I wish when they're doing it, they would do it with like less of a swing to either side. Like I don't like the 20 to 25% or even 50% buffs or nerfs. I think they should be adjusting like all damage or like they should have a design in mind and then be like, okay, so yeah, this maybe needs like a 5% nerf. Like let's say, for example, Destro is blasting with Conflag and Shadowburn. Okay, that feels a bit overtuned. We'll nerf them by 5%, so they'll get a 5% nerf. And you get there that next week, you're realizing actually, you know what, that nerf was a bit too heavy. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to buff it by 2%, and it brings it up ever so slightly. And those numbers are so small and so meaningful yet insignificant at the same time that you don't just completely ruin a spec for because it's way too overtuned, but it also you're kind of aware of when, okay, yeah, we nerfed it a bit too hard and it needs to come up ever so slightly, and those small adjustments I think would actually make the meta more enjoyable because you're able to actually get something down that feels a lot fairer, that with more specs and classes being viable, because actually, you know what, Rets didn't just get 100% nerf on this or 50% nerf on that. They got a 10% or they got a 5%. And that was enough to kind of really rein them in, but not make them feel totally useless. So the amazing fun that you just had isn't going to be obviously godlike, but at least you're going to be able to actually do something, for example. And I think that sort of thing, but more frequently, would actually create a better environment for WoW PvP, because the way that it's swung recently, we've gone from meta to meta within one season, and that can be quite debilitating.
From a content perspective too, like making class guides, for instance, as at least at the beginning of the beginning of Dragonflight was kind of difficult because classes were being redesigned like every single week. There'd be, this class got its talent tree reworked. This class got a new PvP talent. This class had an ability removed. It was kind of like, yeah, I feel like Dragonflight more than anything else is the expansion where they, like, someone made the internal decision to just to say, okay, this is the expansion where we're gonna just do a bunch of experimentation. We're just gonna make crazy changes all the time. Let's see how people react to it. Because I have never in the history of playing this game seen this many dramatic changes this frequent. There's like PvP hotfixes every single week that change the meta ever so slightly, sometimes dramatically. And so, yeah, I think from a content creation perspective, even though it's fun maybe to have all these changes, it just kind of makes things a bit difficult to plan, because at least, for video creation, for instance, I might make like this just recently happened. We might plan a tier list to be released on Tuesday. Then on Monday night, the day before the video gets released, they say, "Oh yeah, we're nerfing Fistweaver." Well, it's like, well, that just can kind of completely maybe ruin the section of the tier list, which is, no big deal in the grand scheme of things, but just from a getting content out that's relevant and accurate, it's kind of difficult right now, especially in the video format, because the game changes so fast. That's just been something that I know personally I've encountered, and I'm not saying that it's wrong that the game is changing so much. It definitely complicates things from a content creation perspective.
Yeah, I think, but like, look at League though, for example. League is another one of those ones where they do these nerfs, but they're not like massive. They're not like swinging. It's not like dead in the water kind of thing. It's adjustments, and I think if they do these adjustments every either couple of weeks or every month or so, and like either a bigger list every month or kind of smaller list every couple of weeks, or maybe they don't because it doesn't need anything, but even then they just do small adjustments when they need to. I think you wouldn't have to worry about that, because it'd be like, you know what, we made the tier list that actually still holds up, because now it's actually a bit more in a fairer place. We have a lot more kind of classes that are and specs that are in an S tier, and the only reason why we have anything in an A and B tier is because they don't bring the same utility that the others do. For example, in how the meta is shifted, and I don't know. I feel like that would feel a lot better. I always think the meta shifts because of the swinging, or the huge swing of power between comps and specs.
I think even if you're doing these small adjustments, like you said, Warlocks go down 5%, and then a couple weeks later go up 2. You've had classes that have constantly gotten small buffs, so it's sort of a hidden. I've forgotten what it is. Power surge almost. I've completely forgotten the way to put it. But
Power creep.
essentially, that's it. Thank you. That would have bothered me the rest of this session. Yes, essentially, you've got these classes that have had a lot of power creep, and these slight changes would still alter that tier list potentially. Because, like you said, Destrolocks and Ellie Shamans specifically have not had any sort of nerfs, have they? They've only had small buffs, I would imagine, throughout the season 1 of Dragonflight. The same with Warlock, Destro Warlock especially, because it was looked as quite weak in season 1, and it was slowly got more and more buffs. And as Paladin sort of came down, Warlocks were kind of there to just overthrow it and take its place immediately without having to do anything essentially. So these small nerfs are, like you said, I think they would be very good if you're trying to get them only small numbers rather than 20% damage reduction to Chaos Bolt or something crazy. But there's always that hidden power creep of another class that has not been touched yet, because there will be something to always.
Here's my hot take. I think the class that always power creeps, the spec that always power creeps the most, is Arms Warrior. I swear to God, Warrior is always just good, and they just somehow get better, and they never get worse. This expansion, they gave Warrior. I mean, they took away Ignore Pain at the beginning of the expansion. They gave it back. Then suddenly, I think they buffed. I believe they buffed Skull Splitter and the Rend build or whatever. And then suddenly Warriors are doing 60% of your health every 30 seconds with Colossus Smash, Skull Splitter, and it's one of those things that just goes under the radar. I think because Warriors are kind of a bit more honest in some weird way, they're just this barbarian, that's not like a cheeky little ninja stabbing you. It's no, it's wild angry dude. And so I think certainly there's some classes that just constantly coast under the radar, and I would argue that Arms Warrior is one of them. Maybe even Disc Priest is one. Disc Priest got crazy since the beginning of the expansion. Double pain suppression, putting penance on the Shadow School with Shadow Covenant. They got a lot of quality of life improvements, but they're a healer, and so I don't think people care as much.
No, I don't feel they didn't feel as oppressive to me until they were doing all that damage, and that got kind of reeled back a little bit. And now they actually feel kind of okay. I'm not tearing my hair out at them doing it. And I think that's the thing, right? And I mean personally, I also think Warriors are really good at gaslighting you into thinking that they're really on the tune, especially on Twitter. They're like, what do you mean? This is totally this is what do you mean? It's like a proc. Okay, well, this proc just killed my friend 50-0. How do you explain that? Sort of you didn't even have to cast that.
It was just lucky.
Yeah, it's just luck.
They just blame the Paladin they're queuing with. It's it's him doing all the damage.
Did you guys know that Warriors have a Tremor Totem type effect? Did you know this?
With the Berserker Rage?
Yeah, I did not know this till recently. I'm like, oh my God, that is broken. If you have a Warrior on your team, they can use Berserker Rage to get you out of fears.
I didn't know
that. You have to be within 12 yards, but I mean, they could just I don't know, heroic leap over to you, Berserker Rage, get you out of your fear. It's pretty ridiculous. They have all the. If you take the second to look at the warrior trees, you'll notice there's these talents. You're like, oh my God, that's broken. They have a shattering throw type ability. It's not shattering throw. They can choose this other thing called wrecking throw, and they can combine it with demolition, and they can just take away a warlock's dark pact with just an instant cast. Yeah, it's like a shattering throw. They can just chunk their shields. Yes,
that needs to be nerfed.
In one blow. Yes, they have all these little tiny things that are just insane, and I don't get how people aren't like pulling their hair out and saying nerf warriors.
It's because we are, but they're just like they're like, no, what do you mean? This is so ridiculous. Like every time I've had a conversation on Twitter, one of these warrior mains have come out of like literally just I don't know the arse end of nowhere and gone like and just like started attacking me personally. Like I've honest to God, I actually have like people making random Twitter accounts, like new Twitter accounts, to like personally attack me just because I've gone, you know what, this is ridiculous. I actually had that. It's mental. Now I don't mean this isn't all warriors, but I'm just saying like it's the I don't know. I definitely think a part of it is the gaslighting on social media. That's for sure.
I have a small hot take.
Okay,
And
ready?
it's so I think that as much as everybody wants all classes and all specs balanced, I think that should never happen. I think you should always have some on B, some some on A, some on S, because if everybody is, let's say, A tier and it's just that minute 0.1% that gets it to S tier or to B tier, then it's too close. And yeah, then all it takes is like, a new season of gear that just gets, that one class that's mastery heavy gets that a little bit more mastery to make it S tier all of a sudden. Like when you're that close, the band is too tight. So I actually like the idea that things are spread further, down into even C, just because then it allows for, then season 1 is melee heavy, and then those nerfs, and then they have a big kind of a bigger swing. So while yes, the 5 to 10%, 5% every week is a slow gradual to kind of like pull something into where they want it to be, I still think that there should be that separation, and that everything shouldn't be sitting at just A tier, give or take 1 or 2%.
That is the hot take.
I know.
Because yeah, I mean, I'll retort by saying it's becoming increasingly difficult to kind of separate things by tiers. I've been making tier lists for God too long now for like actual content, and like I mean, I got to a point at the end of Shadowlands where it's like every healer felt like it was like A tier. It didn't really. I mean, there was like Holy Priest was really broken for a while. I mean, it's easy. I should put it this way: it's easy to see the extremes. It's easy to see what's really really good and maybe really really bad. It's harder to see like everything in the middle. And the other thing that's complicated, the biggest elephant in the room, is that tier lists depend on rating bracket. A tier list at rank 1 level is going to be completely different than a tier list at 1600 or at 1200. That these sort
You
of
mean I
considerations
can't
are
pull
really
that
hard.
same thing I just saw in the AWC tomorrow at the 1500 bracket?
No, you can't. Like
What?
the best example this expansion has been Arcane Mage.
Yeah.
Like Arcane Mage, at least in the first few weeks of the expansion, was like insane at like a rank 1 level. It was in tournaments, it was dominating, right? Doing insanely well. But man, like Arcane Mages have a really high skill floor. And so they're pretty inaccessible for the majority of the player base. So you can't just like it's hard to make a tier list for everyone, is what I'm trying to say. It's actually, I would argue it's impossible. When my philosophy when I make my tier list is I kind of take the game from a high level perspective and sort of mold it to the average player's experience. Um, and that includes like maybe downranking mages a little bit, because mages are really good in the hands of a really good player, but not so great in the hands of an average player. Same thing with like rogue, like sub rogue is another really good example. Really broken if you're highly skilled and technical, but just kind of whatever if you're not. And so, I mean, these things are always, there's tier lists are complicated. That's my TLDR.
You know what I was just thinking as you were saying that, and I don't know whether or not this is incredibly facetious of me, but I was watching. This is a terrible thing to admit. I was watching the skill capped league guides the other day for unrelated reasons that I won't go into. And I was watching it, and one of the things they do, like when they're doing like a full range, like top, mid, whatever, tier list is that they have kind of like what's OP and what's good in low elo and what you should ban.
Oh yeah.
Which I think is a really cool idea because you're kind of going, okay, well, you know what? Here's our tier list of what specs are great. Here's what we suggest you do if you're sort of like 1500, 1600, looking to get to 1800 easily. And this is what, you know, this is like, this is really complicated. Maybe avoid it until you're more confident, kind of thing.
Yeah, I've tried to do that a little bit. I know I've done that with some tier lists. Like for instance, a perfect example of a noob slayer spec is Marksmanship Hunter. Like Marks Hunter just rolls noobs. Like, and I feel bad for saying noobs, but you know what I mean. Like, it's one of those classes where they just bang, you know. And if you're not ready for the bang, you know you're gonna get put like in an Undertaker John Cena choke slam. You know, like you need to know how to react to that. So like Marks Hunters are really good at like lower ratings, but then you get higher ratings, people just like play really lame in line of sight. You know, they play correct, right? That's stupid. And so like it's harder to play a Marks Hunter at higher ratings because people just deny everything you want to do. You know, they prevent you from having fun. But if you're playing against people who will stay in the center of the map, you know, hitting your healer, you're having a blast as a Marks Hunter. You're just like popping off, you know? Like so yeah.
Exactly. I think that works really well. Like I think that would be what people need to do more is sort of go, okay, you know what? Actually, there a lot of the content creators are people that play at a much higher level than most ordinary people. What kind of is there for them isn't the same for other people. It's like I often find it really obnoxious when I see people commenting about how things are good or whatever, and sort of like, oh wait, you've like you're just a gladiator. Like I'm rank 1, you're like really bad. And I always think PvP and your achievements are so subjective and relative to where you are and where you're positioned. Like you will always see whatever is below you as bad and whatever's above you as good. And if you're at the pinnacle, then everyone below you is bad. And that kind of breeds some really toxic stuff. And I think people need to just kind of understand that, you know what, actually this tier list, it might make sense to me, but for a lot of people, actually, this isn't representative of their experiences and what they go through. So actually, you know what, maybe I should suggest something easier for them. Like they might be watching, they might be interested in Ellie. Let's say they watch a guide from me, they're interested in Ellie, but actually, you know what, Ellie's a little bit complicated at the minute because there's a lot of buttons going on. Maybe it's not the best to kind of monitor your totems and kind of have these cooldowns up and everything like that. Maybe that's a bit too difficult. Maybe they need something a bit more like a melee or anything else to kind of get them through. And I think that's where we need to consider with content creation going forward, is that our personal experiences aren't shared at all.
I will say this, maybe to wrap up this conversation a bit. I'm just curious to have your guys' answers. This week I'm finishing a video that's all about ranking each spec in WoW from like easiest to hardest, from the skill floor perspective, like what has the lowest skill floors. And I'm just curious, I want to ask you guys one by one, like maybe for melee caster and melee ranged and healer, what do you guys think are like the lowest skill floor classes? Like just pick one for each one of those roles. Or maybe what has the highest skill floor. I'm just curious what you guys think. So if you guys have an answer for melee, ranged, or healer, I'd be curious to know what you think about that question.
I think well, who wants to go first? That's the first question.
I'll give my quintessential take on a low skill floor spec. It would be Fury Warrior. Fury Warrior, I think, is like the perfect example of a spec that has like an easy rotation combined with a pretty simple task, which is just like do damage. I don't think Fury Warrior is that complicated. I think you can do fairly well in arena by just doing those, you know, the bare minimum essentially. Even if warriors are like, Fury might not be the best spec, but I think it's generally okay. So based on that would be a low skill floor melee.
Okay.
I feel like that's why I enjoy Fury Warriors sometimes, because I can just turn off my brain and just press Rampage and just feel like I'm doing something. Honestly, so
Exactly. Well, the ironic part is it's really fun to play the low skill floor thing.
Yeah, I know.
You're just like, all these decisions that are just kind of annoying. You don't have to think about. You just do the PvP things. You know, you stun and then you're just pumping instantly. You don't have to think about setting up your, ramping your burst. You just press it.
Yeah, it's like you're not looking at DRs at all. You're not looking at what's off fear DR or stun DR or anything. It's just, yep, I have Stormbolt. I'm pressing that. You get rampaged, avatar, whatever. Just yeah, it is a turn off your brain sort of thing. Personally, for my take, it would have been warrior as well, lowest skill. Which is weird to say because obviously each class has their own individual skill floor and ceiling, and I think the real niche stuff that warriors have like is a very high skill ceiling thing. Stuff with like war banner, when to use it and all that sort of thing. But I think for as a very like simple, you're just about to start the game, you go in and this is the easiest class that you can play, I would have went with warrior for lowest skill ceiling. Specifically, yeah, Fury Warrior probably as well.
Yeah.
Jake, what do you think is the low skill floor spec?
I think if you asked me before the ret changes, I probably would have said Warrior 2. That doesn't. I kind of agree with what Gabe says. Although I do personally believe that the skill ceiling for all specs is actually really high because in order to do the niche things you need to do, it does require a level of mastery in that spec. So I'm not by saying that Warriors that has a low skill floor doesn't mean that it doesn't have a high skill ceiling. It's just getting into it actually is kind of it's simple. It does its job. It does damage, and it has an MS effect, which makes you useful in all essences or all iterations of PvP. I'd have to agree. I would have said warrior. I don't know whether or not I'd say paladin now, ret paladin, mostly because of the fact that you just have so much and you have so many defensives and so much damage and just everything is so front loaded into your kit that it's kind of almost sort of like you could turn your mind off and you'd probably still be okay. But I do know, obviously, again, exactly the same thing that in higher rating, you can, like, especially in the shuffles, we're talking 3.1 shuffles, 3K plus shuffles, the rep paladins in any caster sort of group just got absolutely blasted. He got bullied. And I think Warriors would have gotten the same treatment as well, but I think they would have had a better time. So I think my personal thing is Warriors in general, and then also rep Paladins, just because they feel it just that they have so much kit. Like it's just so easy to get into that and not die if you just press the buttons.
Gareth, sorry, what do you think?
Beastmaster.
Oh, that's a good pick as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's like the arms away of ranged.
I agree.
Yeah.
I would have said BM as well for ranged, 100%.
Yeah, I think yeah, obviously it has some utility. It has some niche stuff you can, get in that higher skill ceiling, but I even feel like that skill ceiling is a little bit lower than the Demon Warrior, honestly.
Yeah,
I think you're right. I think they actually are probably the lowest. It's just because you just let the pets do it. I mean, you could literally just get in line and press kill command.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll wrap this up by saying one thing. Like, it's interesting with the change to Demo Warlock, Master Summoner. I would have said Demo might have been on the easier side of things, but I think now it's probably a bit more difficult because of I mean, that's a huge change to the difficulty of Demo Warlock, if we're being honest.
True.
Yeah,
And
100%.
I think Demo is not going to be as free, to anymore. Yeah, it's gonna for sure be a bit more difficult this season.
But even then, like it was only the doggies that were instant cast, which obviously means that you can get like a tyrant out really quickly, but you still had to, people still shut you down. People were still kind of like would still sort of stop you getting tyrant out. They still do that. I think once we see tier set for Demo, I don't think much is going to be different. And I think as soon as they nerf Destro, Demo is going to be back doing its all its fun stuff. So that's my person. But again, it is actually kind of easy because again, I think pet classes in general, apart from Unholy DK, are easy because the pet does a lot of the legwork.
Oh yeah.
In terms of the lowest skill floor, where would you put Frosty K's in that? Because this current iteration of Frosty K's, like end of season 1, where it was just grip in, blind, chill streak, obliterate. Where would you put that in?
I made a tweet about this, and I actually put this in the video. Like I think Frosty K is like easy mechanically, but difficult like conceptually because it. I mean, its burst rotation is literally alternating between two buttons. You know, 1 2 1 2 1 2, and its damage rotation is more or less the same thing. But what I think what's difficult about Frosty K is that you have to play around your setup so strictly, and that encourages you to like spend most of the game running away, playing evasive. You know, you don't do anything between your goes, and I think for that's like a really difficult concept to understand. You know, like that's not something that's necessarily easy because and it's not hard either. So I think it's like somewhere in the middle. You know, I think you have to understand the game really well to exceed, like to truly exceed as a Frosty K. Understand like sort of more advanced PvP concepts. You can't just run in and just stay in the fight the whole time. You have to really play around your setups really precisely. So I think that's sort of the difficulty of Frosty K. Kind of similar to I don't know Windwalker Monk in some ways, where you might not do that much in between your setups, but then your setup happens and everything is that you play for that moment.
Yeah, that's fair enough. No, I'd never looked at it that way because I always just see them grip in, and it's just you look at like the end of a game, it's just obliterate is about 70%, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, great, that's one hell of a class right there. But no, you are correct in terms of it is just about evading after the go. That's why like Evoker DK is hilarious to play against. It's just
Yeah.
so much damage, and then it's just they're running, and it's like, oh, okay,
Well,
sort of a hit and
the
run.
the funniest thing is watching an Evoker DK mirror. Like it is
Oh
so
my.
goofy. Like it is the dumbest looking matchup I've ever seen in like 15 years of playing this game. Like both teams are just they do their scary thing and then they just like don't know what to do. They're like, oh, what do we do now? We just wait and then like we're both gonna wait. Like
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
that's the worst part about the Frost DK kit. I think anything that has like insane burst and then does nothing is so boring. I guess it just
yeah.
feels boring. Like even if you
Mhm.
did like just a little bit more damage, you were able to like let's say you didn't get off your cooldowns, but you're able to do something, then it would be a lot better. But it doesn't. It literally like it hits insanely hard and then hits like a wet noodle. It's just
Isn't that what
Yeah.
they
pointless.
wanted to sort out for Ret Paladins, and then they just ended up overtuning them for like,
They just always hit really hard.
yeah, literally.
That was the problem. Yeah, I mean
Well,
that's exactly. I mean, Frost DK probably does need a rework, but it's just I don't know. I just think that the rework doesn't mean just buff them like crazy. It means sort of like okay, we need to take a look at their kit and understand why Frost DKs have this sort of strange do loads and then do nothing within these windows. Can we make this
mhm.
better? So I don't know.
I think Rhett wouldn't be as bad if with the rework they didn't get all the utility that they gotten.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
think, but um, I do think that we need to get into that last question that we always ask. And
Yes.
Big, since it's your birthday, why don't you ask that question?
Yeah, so Gabe, we have this patented technically PvP question where we like to ask our guests if you could have unlimited power, unlimited resources to change one thing and one thing only when it comes to World of Warcraft, what would that one thing be?
Delete warlocks. No, obviously, it would. Oh god, that's a real tough one. Because I think the point that was brought up earlier was it's not good to have everything like on the same sort of tier because like the smallest margin can define what is meta and what isn't. So I don't think it would be like put everything balanced. I think kind of what is happening now is one thing that I would have loved to have changed. That would have been my answer before, where like they're constantly doing balance patches. I think that's
Mhm.
what one thing that I would have loved to have happened back in Shadowlands, but since they're doing it now, I'm not sure if that's a cheap way of copping out of that. Um, I think it from season one point of view, because the season was so deflated, there wasn't a lot happening. A lot of people went to solo shuffle. I would like to see them try and put more into the arena season, I guess, in terms of incentivizing people to actually do 3v3s, because solo shuffle's an amazing idea. It's absolutely amazing and has really sort of rejuvenated PvP in a way. But you're always going to be taking out of the pool of like 2v2, 3v3, and even like rated battlegrounds, you'll be taking out of that pool and putting into like solo shuffle. People will get that sort of dose of their PvP from that. So I'd like to see them try and incentivize more to play the like 3v3 brackets or 2v2, in my honest opinion. But I think it would have been definitely make more changes if they weren't doing so already. And that's all I can really think of at the moment, more than anything, to try and like get people more into the actual 3v3, because the communication is what makes PvP for me. When like you're talking to your team or just having a laugh, pushing certain goals like 2K, 2.4, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
So I think if people need to, or people should experience that, in my opinion, because it is a massive part of the arena scene and it's probably the most enjoyable part, in my honest opinion.
I
It's
like
kind of
it.
yeah, it's kind of sad to think about that there might be some players out there who will never in their time playing this game like step into a rated 3v3 arena on communications, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's certainly new players who only probably play uh solo shuffle.
Yeah, and
And
that's the thing. It's not the most pleasant play solo shuffle. It can be quite hostile sometimes.
Mhm.
yeah,
There's usually 1 out of 6 in there that's not the happiest person in that game, we'll say. So
I
it's
think I think even before solo shuffle though, like there's people that PvP'd only by playing random battlegrounds, just like there is PvEers that only rated in LFR.
yeah.
So
mm-hmm.
I think that is just like it's a natural progression where you know people play what they're comfortable into doing. There's the people that want to push themselves outside of their comfort zone and try to do better and try to improve, and there's other people that just there's a number of people that play this MMO RPG in solo mode, and they're totally okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It's
mean
interesting.
for me, I like playing threes. I'll play threes if someone asks me to play threes, but I don't really have the opportunity as much nowadays. So I like having solo shuffle just
Mm-hmm.
constantly there, you know. It's like going to the gym, you know. It's like you could just go on a jog by yourself, or you could get like a personal trainer, but just going to the gym by yourself and having a good time and working on yourself independently is fun, you know.
Yeah.
I don't mind it.
I think there's a massive difference though between queuing as a healer in solo shuffle and queuing as a DPS. It sounds ridiculous, and
It's true.
I'm pretty sure you will hate me for saying this. I enjoyed playing more as a healer than I did a DPS,
Yeah, but
purely on the
I
basis that I
I
didn't want to queue as a DPS because it took
I
about
don't.
30 minutes.
True, true,
Yeah,
true.
my hot take is that these people who are saying that healing sucks in solo shuffle are just wrong. I think healing's so fun in solo shuffle.
Yeah, I
Like
thought it was.
I mean, it's frustrating when your partners make mistakes, whatever. But it's like from the DPS perspective. I mean, your healer makes mistake when you're playing a DPS, and that's kind of frustrating. I like the pace of the game. I like things to be a bit fast. And I think even as a druid, who typically doesn't like the game to be fast, I was having a blast like just healing and solo shuffle. And then when I started playing priest, oh my god, I was like, this is like the most fun I've ever had playing disc priest and solo shuffle. So I don't know why these people are complaining. Like it's fun.
I think I purely enjoy it on the basis that I get an instant like queue pop.
Oh yeah,
I'm not
that's the
yeah.
best part. Yeah.
I'm not just sat there 15 to 30 minutes waiting, like doing nothing, twiddling my thumbs, and then I can just log over to my like Mistweaver queue, instant pop, and then just basically have a piss about. Not really care if like I win or lose. I just wanted to play the game. That's the
Just bunch
thing.
of people. Yeah.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, I can see that. Um, actually, Jake, I wonder what's
Mm.
the one thing you change?
Well, you know what? We talked about it earlier. I genuinely think this is an insane idea. I think they should add, I think for threes to kind of incentivize people, they put a very prestigious flying mount themed from the from the expansion to get people to want to do threes. Like, get this mount, it looks really cool. Now, obviously, we already have that, but in comparison to your regular old ground mount that's like a reshade from Legend and RPGs and stuff like that, it would kind of really make people want to play threes more. I think to kind of go like, okay, yeah, you got that cool little ground mount from there, but I got this really cool flying mount. That would be what I'd do. I'd put in the prestige mounts that are kind of part and parcel of WoW, especially PvP. So that would
Cool.
be what I would change.
Nice. Um, I would have them do regular PvP interviews monthly, even.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like what like in what sense?
Either have them talk with community people or do similar to what we just saw Lixie do with Morgan Day and I'm forgetting her name now, but the official WoW kind of thing. Sit down, but actually like maybe have a bunch of PvP devs sit down and talk about the meta for the month and what they think about it and what changes they might do and what they're kind of formulating stuff. Even that would be
Well,
cool, but just communication. Period.
technically, PvP is open to that.
Heck
So,
yeah.
any devs that might listen to this, either live or afterwards, please do come talk to us. We're very friendly. We're very lovely. We don't ask trap questions or difficult questions. We just want to know what you think about the balancing and what you've done. That'd be fun.
Yeah. When are we getting to get another BG?
Yeah, when we get another BG. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that's the trap question.
That's
Ha, we've lured you here. Now you must answer this question.
That's all right. I think big though. Birthday boy.
So
What's the one thing you change?
yeah. So I opened up this podcast by saying I'm a world PvP Padawan,
Yes.
and doing the Sparks quest at the beginning of the season always feels it's like amazing as someone who tends to only play the competitive stuff. I love doing the Sparks weekly quest. And I was like, wow, like I know people complain that there's not enough rewards for world PvP, and I'm starting to maybe agree. Maybe there should be some sort of built-in ladder or something, some way to get people to do more world PvP all the time, because I love doing that weekly Sparks quest as a healer. I love being in the front lines, healing my bros, battle resing when they die, running away. So I think maybe the world PvPers are right. Maybe there needs to be some new system with how that works in the game. Um, anyway, that would be what I change. Something for the world PvPers.
That'd be awesome. Actually, I really like the changes they made this like to really incentivize world PvP has been mint, like chef's kiss, this expansion. So I think some iteration would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I think you would have to like switch up completely though, because there's a couple of achievements where like you get a certain amount of honor within the uh zones, and you can get a title from it, I believe. And
Mm-hmm.
I was in like Zaralek Caverns or whatever, and there was just a bounty. So naturally, I go towards the bounty and just look, and there's about 50 Horde players and 50 Alliance players just stood side by side, and all they were doing was having one person continuously res them, and they would just wipe them, continuously wipe them until they got this achievement on both sides. And that's kind of where it's like, that's where you can sort of cheese these sort of rewards almost. Kind of like
Yeah.
if you look at
They're win trading. in World
yeah,
PvP.
essentially. If you look at Classic, that's a great example. When it was actually in Vanilla Classic, you would have level 1s go and kill Horde to bolster the brackets so more people got like better results essentially for when they were ranking. So I think you'd have to completely switch up the entire sort of metric almost of it. It's like you can only kill a certain person twice or something before they stop giving honor or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely has to be some stuff put in to stop the gimmicks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still like the idea of incentivizing it more.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
yeah. Well, here, let's get into the news quickly, and then we'll roll this out because I know it's getting pretty late over there on the island.
All
Early
right.
days.
Who ordered up an extra large can of whoop ass?
All right. So into the PvP news, talking about events, there was the Mythic Plus Keystone Builder Tournament, which was done by Raider.io and Oasis, finished on the 30th of April. So quick congratulations to the team who invited the Warrior for winning that one. Purely a crowd-funded event. Did an amazing, really fun event. That was quite fun to watch over the weekend. So if you want, go back over. There's a tweet there from Twitter. Pretty sure it was Oasis's. I'm pretty sure it was on the Oasis Twitch where they were hosting it, so you can go check it out. Fun to watch if you want to see some PVE, PvP hot fixes, big time hot fixes. Obviously, we had the brand new patch just dropped. Well, today or yesterday if you're E or NA. Already seeing some patches, mostly on the PvE side. There was a bunch of class balancing right before the season started. I'm hearing, like, I know there was on the PvP side. So Mistweavers, they had some nerfs, which were, I think, targeted more for the fist weaving. But seeing Mystical and his tweet, it seems like fist weaving, although not as powerful as it was before, is still pretty strong, especially against casters. So I wouldn't count them out. Other than that, I'm gonna throw Gabriel. I know I'm probably eating into what you're gonna do for your podcast, but is there anything that jumped out at you on the show note or on the patch notes?
I think you've already touched on it, the fist weaving. I think mostly it was obviously one of the most prominent healers or types of healer in season 1 with Rets being strong and stuff, but I think it seems like it's in a decent position, which I think is where all healing specs should be. It's like not oppressive, but it's useful in certain situations. So you always have it in your back pocket if you ever need it. It's quite weird that they do this before the season's even started, to be honest, just after a massive sort of balance. I would have thought they would have done it a week into the season, but apparently not. I think, yeah, it's probably mostly the Mistweaver that got hit. A few things with Boomy where it's just upping damage, even though I think it was already in a good spot. They're just tweaking a couple things with like Wrath damage because they're increasing the damage it does in Solar Eclipse or something now. It's so weird why they even looked at that in the first place, in my opinion.
It's like a PvE thing because I think in
Yeah.
PvE you spam wrath no matter what your eclipse. I don't remember what there's some reason for that. I
Yeah.
don't.
But the thing is, it's completely the opposite in PvP. You would always get your free like Starfire procs to get into Solar Eclipse because you just want to be in an eclipse. You don't really care which one. So it seems weird that they didn't do that just for PvE and that it applied to PvP because it's essentially just adding more damage to boomies when they didn't need the damage. They needed maybe a bit more work on the defensive side more than anything because we just get shut down by everything, even an assassination rogue still, and that's not in a good spot. Um, they're probably the two that I would have looked at and noticed the most more than anything else. Everything else is just very small, like
Yeah.
bits and pieces.
Don't disagree. Big. Is there anything that jumped out at you?
I mean, they buffed Resto Druid recently. Well, they undid a nerf up. They partially unnerfed something, and so I mean, I'm gonna play my first solo shovels actually today. I didn't have the item level. I'm kind of feeling bad. I didn't play in the off week, and I logged on my druid, and I was like, oh wait, I don't have any honor, so I can't buy any new honor gear. So I'm just now today gonna start playing, and I'm gonna see how it feels. But I'm probably gonna play druid a lot this season. The priest as well. I know I was playing mage at the end of last season, but I mean they kind of even nerfed mage in a weird way by removing like Netherwind armor in the patch. So I mean, mages are extra squishy now, but who knows? Maybe mages can be fun. But yeah, probably just gonna play druid and priest because they didn't really change much, and in fact, druid got even better. So happy.
Cool. I like it. Jake.
Yeah, the feral slight nerfs are the ones that I'm interested in. They, I think, honestly, ferals are the most under the radar, well, one of the most under the radar OP specs at the minute. Like genuinely scary how much damage they can do. Obviously not beyond the padding, obviously on your pets and everything like that, but they can do a lot of damage. And I think anything that kind of pulls them back a little bit is good because I think they got like a 5% buff from 10.1, and I was kind of like, but why? They were so good anyway. Like I've watched so much like feral gameplay or gameplay people doing threes, and just the ferals absolutely destroying it. It's just like every single shuffle that I did, the feral was out of control. Like it was just so insanely strong. So those are the one. That's what's kind of there for me. Like there is a slight fix for that. It's not big or anything, but it definitely is something. So I'll take it.
Nice. Yeah, I noticed that Feral's got a little bit of nerf there, much needed. So obviously, season 2 just started today. We'll see what the meta looks like. Race to World First obviously started today as well. Jake, when are you doing your Race to World First PvP?
Well, I was actually going to utilize the shout out feature, but I guess I could do it now. Basically, if you haven't already heard from me before, but I probably mentioned it a few times that I really want to do a Race to World First for PvP. It is an incredible amount of workload. So if there are any people out there, shout out to you who, but basically I'm looking for people to help me out and do it. Like, I don't know whether it'll be this expansion or maybe it'll be next expansion. Maybe it'll be the end of this expansion that we get it sorted. But the idea is to get something sorted. And I have a plan of action. I know what we're going to do. And I think it could work out and it'll be really, really fun. I just need people to support me do it. So if you are interested in my concept for this and you want to get involved, please do send me a DM, especially on Twitter at TreeSapJake. That would be perfect, and we'll discuss it and see what we can do. Because I would love to get that rolling because I think we have the opportunity to.
Yeah, I think it'd be awesome. All right. The last one. Sorry, I'm getting a little tired here too. The community manager Bornak, over on the U.S. polls. Apparently, this is U.S. polls only. Did a poll asking people what their favorite way to play World of Warcraft was. You could only play one. This did just close yesterday. 11,500 votes. So not insignificant poll size. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, depending on how you look at it, Mythic plus Dungeons was the top at 19%. Dragonflight PVP at 16%. And then below that, there was Classic Hardcore, then Outdoor Questing, Classic Raiding, Classic Era. Dragonflight Raiding came in at 9%, followed by Classic PvP at 5%, and then Other at 3%, and Wrath Classic Dungeons a whopping 1%. So, unfortunately, this was only on the US forums, so the poor folks over on the EU couldn't vote. Big sad, but hopefully maybe they'll do the same thing over on the EU. We'll see what they do. But I thought that was pretty interesting, especially considering how many people got onto social media and in the forums and everything saying how much they detested how Dragonflight PvP was after 10.0.7. I'm surprised it actually came out as high as it did. I'm not gonna lie.
I think it's because people do genuinely love WoW PvP. That's the reason why we stick with it. Like, even when it's horrible, like, I appreciate the devs' hard work. I appreciate what they do. Yeah, they might not get it right. It might suck. Might not understand what they've done, but I love it. And I don't want to stop doing it. And I think there are a lot of people out there. I think some of the people on Twitter and in other places in the WoW community kind of go, "Oh, PvP is like a mini game." Yeah, well, the mini game is almost as popular as the Mythic Plus. So, are you also a mini game? Is Mythic Plus also a mini game? Because it's kind of looking like raiding, which is meant to be the main thing, does even worse than PvP. So, what's going on? I think the point being is that we're not, like, we are a significant part of the player base. We're the player base that keeps coming back and we're also the player base that queues all day. Like, we're the ones that will play all day because you can do arena all day and just time flies. So we are a staple of it. And I think that's the great thing with that poll, is that kind of shows it. And I hope the devs can see, actually, you know what? M plus is there, but arena, that staple that's been in the game since TBC, is a big part of it still. And although it is only US, we are here.
True fact.
It's also the fact that, like, we're very dedicated to it, because we've seen so many awful seasons. We've seen great seasons. Obviously, depending on what you play, it's very much, we are always queuing, no matter what kind of season. Like, Rep Warrior felt awful. It felt awful. Let's face it. If you weren't a Rep player, if you weren't a Warrior player, if you weren't a melee in 10.0.7, it felt not great. But we still kept queuing because it's just something that obviously everyone loves to do, PvP, and it wouldn't change at all, no matter what sort of state it's in. You'd always think maybe the next patch will be better and stuff like that. Sorry to cut you off, by the way.
No. You kind of took the words right out of my mouth.
You're here to cut him off. That's why we got you on.
Oh, God.
Makes
Finally
content.
controlled
Yeah. Everybody takes their chance to try to cut me off while I'm talking, but that's okay. All right. Speaking of, well, actually, it's not really cutting each other off, but let's give each other the chance finally to say the last few things, the last words before we close this out. And that's going to be the shout outs. Jake, I'm going to skip you over since you already took yours early. But Gabe, you being the guest, you get to start us off. What shout out would you like to make as we close out the show?
Probably one for the podcast, if that's all right.
Sure.
I do run my own podcast. It's called Pig and Whistle Tales. It has its own website. You can find it simply by typing in pigandwhistletales.com. I do want to say thank you very much for having me, firstly. It is a massive pleasure.
The pleasure's ours, man.
Yeah,
been
100%.
good. And just as a note, the link for your stuff is going to be in the show notes as well. So when we publish it, it'll be down at the bottom, so people can find you as well.
That's perfect. Thank you very much for that.
No worries. Big. How about you? Do you have a shout out?
Yeah, shout out to myself because it's my birthday.
The one time you can.
Yes. So shout out to
Those
me
would be mine for
being...
you, man. Shit.
Oh, in true PvP fashion, I've outplayed you. You know, like I preemptively called your shout out.
You breathed the go. Oh my gosh.
I preed the shout out. Yes.
You procced his precog, and now he's. That's it.
Oh boy. All right. I guess I'm going to give a shout out to all the listeners. Just a big shout out to everybody who follows us, who listens to us, to our ramblings, and interacts with us over on the Discord, on Twitter, everywhere we're around. Big shout out to you. If it wasn't for the people who listen to us and interact, we'd probably still be doing this, but it just wouldn't be as much fun. So thank you all. All right, Jake, I know. Do you have any other shout outs you want to give?
Shout out to Big. Happy birthday, buddy. There we go. I've stolen it again.
Took it back.
Yeah.
You clipped out his shout out. All right.
I did get a shout out. Yeah.
There you go. Okay. I guess since Gabriel, since you already told, is there any other place where people can find you other than your website there? Where
Twitch
can they
would
find you?
be Twitch would be the probably second best. Simply twitch.tv/pig and whistle tales. Do a lot of streaming there. Usually Wednesdays, Sundays are the main ones, and then anything in between. That's just simply light-hearted content such as raiding with the guild on them days, and then arenas are in between. All the people not listening to me in comms. What's happening during them times? Yep.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right. Big. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find us?
Sure, you can contact us directly with a tweet to @technically_PVP or by an email to technicallypvp@gmail.com. You can also join our discussions on the Bonus Roll Productions Discord.
Also, you can visit the Bonus Roll website to find the podcast directory with us and many other great shows at www.bonusroll.gg. This directory also has a review system, so head over there and tell everyone what you think of your favorite shows, including our own.
Indeed. And as always, links for everything we talked about are going to be in the show notes. I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll chat with you next time. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Take care.